Tonight on News, we bring you special coverage of the rapidly unfolding crisis between Iran and Israel. Following Israel's largest air offensive targeting Iranian military and nuclear sites, Tehran has withdrawn from nuclear talks with the United States and vowed severe retaliation. With missiles exchanged and civilian casualties mounting, world leaders are urging restraint as fears of a wider conflict grow. Join our special coverage on Qnews, where we tackle the latest developments. Iran has withdrawn from nuclear talks, with the U.S. canceling the sixth round of negotiations set for tomorrow in Oman. Tehran's decision follows Israeli strikes on Iranian military and nuclear facilities. These so-called preemptive attacks escalated tensions, prompting Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei to vow retaliation and make Israel miserable. Iran responded with missile launches as UN Chief Antonio Guterres urged restraint and a political resolution to the crisis. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that there is no justification for continuing nuclear talks with the United States in light of the continued Israeli attacks. Despite Iran's withdrawal, the Washington Post reported from a U.S. official that the United States is still interested in conducting talks with Iran. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has issued a warning to Israel, saying any repeated attack will be met with a stronger military response. President Pezeshkian stated that the Iranian forces intercepted Israeli equipment designed to evade radar detection. He warned that without Iran's current defense capabilities, Israel would carry out daily strikes against Iranian territory. The remarks follow heightened tensions after recent Israeli attacks, which Iran says will not go unanswered. به فرموده امام بزرگوار ما هر پرچمی از دست سرداری بیفتد. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that Israeli warplanes may soon fly over Tehran, claiming recent strikes have set Iran's nuclear program back by years. In a recorded statement, Netanyahu said Israel dealt a powerful blow to Iran's nuclear capabilities and warned that further heavier strikes are coming. He stressed Israel will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons and will act with full force if necessary. The Israeli military spokesperson has stated that they are currently conducting attacks on several sites in Iran, with fighter jets flying over Tehran for over 2 hours. He declared that Tehran is no longer fortified and emphasized their strong strike against Iran's nuclear program, targeting buildings and laboratories involved in uranium enrichment. The spokesperson affirmed their commitment to take necessary actions to prevent Iranian threats. חופש אווירי שיאפשר לנו לפעול ולסכל איומים על מדינת ישראל. Social media videos have shown a dark smoke rising from an automotive factory in western Iran, reportedly struck by an Israeli attack. The factory's location in bordered through matching trees and flag poles seen in satellite imagery. Iranian media also reported strikes on a garrison in Kermanshah and the bordered factory. This escalation follows Israel's extensive air offensive aimed at halting Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran says 60 people, including 20 children, were killed in an Israeli strike on Tehran. Iranian state TV aired footage of a destroyed residential complex in the capital, reporting heavy civilian casualties. The attack comes amid a wave of missile exchanges between Israel and Iran. Israeli forces claim they struck over 150 sites across Iran, targeting key military and nuclear personnel in their largest offensive to date. Has been observed near Iran's Abdan oil refinery, with uncertainty about its origin. This comes after Israel's largest air offensive against Iran, targeting military and nuclear sites. In retaliation, Iran launched numerous ballistic missiles at Israel, when reports indicated an Israeli strike near the Tabriz refinery, heightening concerns that Israel Iranian oil facilities, causing oil prices to surge by nearly 7%. Ladies and gentlemen, to sum up today's developments, Iran has officially withdrawn from nuclear negotiations with the United States, canceling the sixth round of scheduled talks that was due to begin tomorrow in Oman. The decision comes just days after a series of powerful Israeli airstrikes targeted what Tel Aviv described as Iranian military and nuclear facility strikes that Tehran has condemned as acts of war. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei vowed decisive retaliation, declaring that Israel has made a grave mistake and promising what he called a miserable future for the Israeli leadership. His comments were followed by a series of retaliatory missile launches from Iran, escalating tensions even further. Tehran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that with continued Israeli attacks, there is no justification to proceed with nuclear talks. Iran's decision to pull out deals a blow to diplomatic efforts. And although Washington says it remains open to dialogue, prospects for diplomacy appear dim, at least for now. In the latest violence, Iran has reported that at least 60 civilians, including 20 children, were killed in a major Israeli strike on a residential complex in Tehran. State television aired footage showing widespread destruction and emergency crews combining through rubble in the capital. The Israeli military claims it has targeted more than 150 sites inside Iran, the largest Israeli air campaign in history, striking what it called key military and nuclear infrastructure. Meanwhile, there are growing fears Israel may expand its military targets to include Iran's energy infrastructure. Smoke was seen rising near the Abdan oil refinery, and an earlier Israeli strike near the Tabriz refinery has added to concerns. Global oil markets reacted swiftly, with prices surging nearly 7%. And the United Nations is urging restraint. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has condemned both the strikes and the retaliations, calling for all parties to de-escalate. His spokesperson, Stephanie Tremblay, said Guterres personally reached out to Iran's foreign minister, reaffirming that diplomacy, not military escalation, is the only viable solution. Iran's response has also moved to the international arena. Foreign Minister Araghchi has called on the United Nations to take immediate action, accusing Israel of violating Iranian sovereignty and international law. Iran's ambassador to the UN, Saeed Ervani, went further, calling the attacks a declaration of war and invoking Article 51 of the UN Charter, which affirms a nation's right to self-defense. He warned that any Iranian response would be lawful and proportionate, but urged the Security Council to prevent what he described as further aggression. The consequences of these developments are far-reaching. On the one hand, Israel insists it's acting preemptively against a state it views as an existential threat. On the other, Iran maintains it is defending its sovereignty and its right to nuclear energy. The international community now faces a critical juncture. Calls for restraint grow louder, yet the path to de-escalate appears increasingly fragile. As always, we'll continue to follow developments closely and bring you verified updates as they come in. And for further analysis on the matter, Amira Rasha Yusri, the specialist in Israeli affairs, joins us from Cairo. Welcome to Q News. We're glad to have you with us. And let me first start by asking you, how significantly is Israel's military escalation contributing to regional instability? And could it be deliberately expanding the conflict beyond Iran?
Firstly, I'd like to thank you for having me. The Israeli strikes it seems that a very serious escalation in the region, particularly that Iran had already retaliated in similar strikes against Israel and its military army. And it seems like if the region did not, or rather the international community would contain such an incident, that would lead the parties along with the Argentina in a wider scale regional war that would yield to not good results.
Now, I have to ask you, is there reliable evidence backing Israel's rationale for the strikes, or is it leveraging the nuclear threat as a pretext for broader strategic aims in the region?
Israel is always speaking about the Iranian threat to the Israeli entity. And what they did recently justified before the international community to pursue the not having Iran and nuclear weapons as they did in the last April by attacking the air defense system of Iran. And once again, Iran tried to fix the damage affected to its facility. So talking about that Israel has a barrage of goals as announced by Israel, which is the possession of Iran to the nuclear weapons, do not wish, along with the international community, to have Iran developing nuclear capabilities. So they pursue to fail such a goal, and before the whole world, Israel having the pretext that the negotiation never yielded to its fruit, and along with the U.S., Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and several other regional countries is trying to relentlessly to de-escalate the tensions in the region and to mediate or pursue to have the Iranian delegation back to the negotiation table.
So, speaking of the Israeli goals you've mentioned earlier, so after Israel targeted nuclear facilities in Iran and even killed nuclear scientists, I have to ask you, to what extent did Israel dismantle Iran's nuclear resources? And does this signify a transition in a strategy from deterrence to direct engagement?
There's no doubt that the Israeli strike against Iran's nuclear facilities and included in a great portion of, or rather damaging the nuclear facilities that will lead Iran to abandon its position to nuclear weapons, to return into the negotiation table. In the first strikes did not affect or damage the nuclear facilities, but later on had damaged the air defense system along with the launchers manufacturers, missile launchers manufacturing. And but Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, stated a while ago that the latest Israeli strike that had made an great damages to against the main plant of the enrichment of the uranium. The fear is now is a similar retaliation by Iran. Frankly, the estimation of the military in Israel think that they might expect similar strikes by Iran as they did yesterday in reaching the Israeli depths within Israel, as reportedly that Rishon Lexion town was largely damaged, led the death of the three people acted in the southern of Tel Aviv. So reaching missiles into the depths of Israel pose a greater threat to Israel, as Israel through its strikes posing a great threat in the Iranian depths, particularly that Israel has announced that has a free movement in the Iranian skies. Such incident would escalate the tensions. So launching war in the region isn't in the basic or the status quo, is practically a war, but a psychological war. So disseminating such news that will ignite the inside two countries. Iran might study to have the Hormuz Strait being closed, which is an agreed and a big move that would de-escalate largely the region, and it might ally the countries engaged that would lead to a big regional war, or rather another world war.
So yeah, the main goal of cutting in, but speaking of Iran's options here, I have to explore a different aspect. Iran has announced that it withdrew from the nuclear talks with the United States. However, Washington Post has said that, or has reported rather, that the United States is still willing to conduct negotiations with Iran. What are the chances here of Iran returning to the table of negotiations, maybe after achieving a certain bank of goals?
I see that the amount of gains achieved by each party, if their public feel made the provocation or justifications for their parties to achieve, and if they reshape their images, they might go back to the negotiation table. Iran would be stand still, and maybe that would increase the matter. If along Israel is trying to launch more strikes, the international community, as I mentioned, has a great role to play. And if the goal for both parties or for the international community to make Iran submitted to the American conditions, and such strikes primarily his goal against or the retaliation against or attacking Iran. So not to taking the manner of tit for tat isn't might lead to the return for the negotiations, as America announced that they might join the upcoming round of negotiations, but to as Israel is informed us as they do, such strikes during the day, based in the estimation that tonight will be have some sort of Iranian retaliation against Israel. It's a great casualties in the region. All the airlines such as Lufthansa have suspended its activities in the region, such as airspace in Syria was closed, let alone that Israel has already struck an airport in Iran as a civil airport under the pretext that the Iranian strikes
yes, Ms.
have
Amira,
reached.
your point is clear. That was Amira Rasha Yusri from Cairo, the specialist in Israeli affairs. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News and for all the insights you provided us with. Iran's supreme leader has vowed serious consequences after Israeli strikes, warning Tel Aviv it has made a grave mistake. Ali Khamenei declared that Israel will face decisive retaliation with no leniency, saying its future will be dire. He emphasized national unity behind Iran's armed forces and vowed a significant response to what he called Zionist aggression. Khamenei further said Iran will prevail in its confrontation with Israel. Associate spokeswoman for UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Stephanie Tremblay, has stated that Guterres contacted Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to emphasize the need for restraint to prevent further conflict. She added that as tensions between Iran and Israel escalate, Guterres condemned military actions and reaffirmed that diplomacy is essential for addressing regional security issues. Tremblay added that he plans to engage with other world leaders on the matter to seek peaceful resolutions. Iran is calling on the United Nations to take immediate action after what it calls Israeli acts of war, violating its sovereignty. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that Israel's strikes hit both military and civilian sites. He invoked Iran's right to self-defense under international law. Guterres condemned the attacks and pledged efforts to de-escalate the growing conflict. Iran's UN ambassador has labeled Israel's recent attacks as a declaration of war and called for international action. Saeed Erevani told the UN Security Council that Israel's strikes were acts of terrorism targeting Iran's sovereignty, including peaceful nuclear sites. He invoked Article 51 of the UN Charter, affirming Iran's right to self-defense. Erevani warned that any Iranian response will be disproportionate and urged the Council to prevent further aggression.
By aiding and enabling these crimes, by they share responsibility for the consequences. Supporting Israel today is supporting war crimes.
And for further analysis on the matter, Professor Hussein El-Diq, the expert in Israeli and American affairs, joins us now from Jerusalem. Welcome, sir, to this special coverage. And I have to start by asking you, what potential risks arise from broader regional escalation following Iran's threats to target U.S. military bases and its increased missile deployments?
Outset, greetings to you and your viewers, and thanks for having me. Based on my estimation, the American bases in the Middle East never been in the American fires. But the current confrontation is between Tel Aviv and Tehran. Both sides, either Tehran and Washington, aren't concerned to engage in direct confrontation by targeting by Iran into the American military bases in the Middle East. Iran is very much aware that confronting to the U.S. is a kind of a political side of the Iranian regime. As the Israeli goal, after being announced, is the destruction over the Iranian nuclear and ballistic programs, but the real goal that is announced is to topple the Iranian regime. As Israel thinks that all the Iranian allies that attacking Israel are supported by Iran, therefore they reach to the main center. So they are aware that toppling the Iranian regime is the elimination of any resistance that pose a threat to Israel. That's why Israel have reached the Iranian depths by airstrikes too far away, not only destroying the nuclear program, but to change the regime or toppling it. But the direct confrontation with Washington by targeting the American military bases in the Middle East is off the table and
So,
maybe
sir,
impossible.
sorry for cutting in, but I have to ask you, so you don't see any chances of the United States intervening in this war with Israel against Iran?
The United States, as announced, is interfering based on defense, not to attack. Meaning, if Israel was attacked, to defend through their bases by targeting the drones and the missiles while they are hidden to Israel. But the direct confrontation is trying to somehow not engage totally in the war, despite they provide logistics support and fueling the Israeli aircraft through its military or their military bases in the Middle East. But the direct confrontation up till this moment is off the table, and even Iran do not wish to have it. And talking about the Third World War by engaging different parties, I think it is impossible. This is a calculated confrontation that been led.
Sir, sorry for cutting in once again, but I have to ask you about Russia's position. So in what ways could Russia's proposal for mediation affect the geopolitical landscape of the Iran-Israel conflict, particularly given the current tensions with the West?
Based on my estimation, the Russian stance isn't going to be as bold as possible. And the main reason that Israel is moving in serving the Western imperialism and American interests, and they wish to achieve gains on the West and Israeli levels. So the mediation by Russia is going to be received by a good listening and response by Israel based on the logic that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to achieve personal goals that never been achieved in the previous times. Such achievements, such as destroying the nuclear Iranian program and changing the current Iranian regime.
That was Professor Hussein Eldik from Jerusalem, the expert in Israeli and American affairs. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News and for all the information you provided us with. This brings us to the end of our special coverage on the latest developments between Iran and Israel. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG to stay informed. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.